So good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I hope you all had a really nice 4th of July. Thank you for being here. You got to hear some of our little side chat ahead of time talking about Leadership Greater Nashua and what the class did this year and our plans for that group for the fall. And so we're very pleased to welcome Nashua's Chief of Police this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. These chamber exclusive conversations have been a tremendous opportunity to hear directly from some of our leaders from a variety of sectors, how things have been this year, right? It's been a very unexpected year. And so it's a nice chance to kind of hear what changes happened immediately because things changed so quickly and how the process has been, and then what maybe you foresee for the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Chief. I'm going to spotlight your video so that everybody can see you nice and big. And then everyone, you do have the option to submit questions as we go along. So feel free to pop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and I will ask when we get to that point. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kate. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me. I do recognize a couple of the names, and I've seen some of you and spoken to groups that you've been at a couple of times recently. So I'm going to try to change a little bit about what I discussed today, hopefully to be more applicable to you and what this group is about. We had spoken, Kate and I had spoken several months back, and she had said, hey, this is the project we're doing. Would you be interested in speaking? I said, sure. And then we were kind of hit with COVID, and we were hit with a couple of other major issues. So I think I've changed what I wanted to talk about a couple of times throughout the course of the last couple of months. So I'm gonna kind of go in reverse order today. The things I'd like to talk about are two major impacts over the past few months that have affected the police department and how we do operations. But I want to kind of talk about the perspective of how I handled it with the Nashua businesses in mind. Because a lot of different things came into play. There was, some public safety issues. There were medical issues, and a lot went into play and how it related to kind of some of the cornerstones of my administration. But every time something new came up, it was important for us to keep the businesses and how what was happening, impacting the businesses mattered and factored into the decisions that we made. So I'm going to go a little bit in reverse order today. I want to start by talking a little bit about how we handled the national crisis involving law enforcement and what happened out in Minneapolis, and kind of the response here and the decisions we made and why we made them. There was obviously a lot of emotional stuff going on. There was a lot of anger. A lot of people had pent up emotion. That the whole thing kind of came at the end of COVID, or in a part of COVID where people had been stuck inside, had been restricted from doing anything, seeing anybody, or going anywhere. So I think there was a lot of pent up anger and energy just waiting to unleash. And unfortunately, when Mr. Floyd was killed, that energy was released at law enforcement. So we've been struggling with that for the past 4 weeks, and it's been quite a challenge for me personally and professionally for us on a bunch of different levels. But when all that started to happen, we started to see major protests throughout the country. We had a protest scheduled in Nashua for a Saturday. It was being organized by Black Lives Matter Nashua, one of the founders of which is Jordan Thompson, who we know pretty well, and I've had a relationship with, which was important. So he was planning a vigil for Greeley Park on that Saturday night. I had been to a similar protest in Manchester on Tuesday night, 4 days earlier, where it started to get out of control. The marchers continued to walk down Elm Street, down to South Willow, if you're familiar with Manchester. And along the way, a couple of groups met up. There was some issues with some people with guns and protesters mixing and matching, and police trying to keep them on the street. And there was also groups on South Willow Street threatening some of the businesses there. So when we got words that the rally was going to happen, a couple of concerns I had. Number one, groups coming to the police department, the protests and what that meant at the park and what that could look like. And if they decided to march from Greeley Park and go somewhere, where would they go? Well, Greeley Park is a little bit isolated, but only a mile and a half away is Main Street, Nashua, with all the businesses. And as you know, we had all just opened up those businesses. We were trying to accommodate the restaurants to make sure that they could get to keep serving and kind of get started back up, so they weren't all losing all their money. And that was important to us, and it seemed to be going successful. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But we got some phone calls from some of the business owners on Main Street. Should we close? Should we board up? What do we expect? And unfortunately, I didn't have much of an answer because we really didn't know what to expect. I knew for the past several years we've worked very hard with our relationship building in Nashua with all of our different communities, both minority businesses, nonprofits, all those groups. So it was important I knew that we had those relationships built up, and I felt that that wouldn't explode in Nashua, but it was still unpredictable. So my plan for that evening was to have the rally at home, Greeley Park. Small contingent of officers there. I think we had 6 or 7 helping out with traffic. I was there with a couple of guys, and that was it. We wanted a low visibility presence. We wanted to be respectful of the vigil, respectful of people's emotion and their anger, and allow them the opportunity to vent it. At the same time, we had to make sure that we kept all the businesses, both downtown Nashua, up along Amherst Street, and even as far down as Daniel Webster Highway, safe and protected. So we had a lot of help. We had a large amount of my officers, so we had 178 of our officers present that night in different levels of preparedness. We had some staged at a school. We had 100 state troopers staged at another school, and we had 100 National Guardsmen staged down at the Armory down on DW Highway. So we were very prepared to handle anything that kind of blew up or anything that got out of control. So we felt we'd be able to protect the businesses very quickly and very effectively. We learned some things up in Manchester the week earlier, so we changed how we would approach it, and I thought it would have worked well had we needed it. Fortunately, the rally was very, very peaceful. There was no issues at all. At the end of the rally, the groups broke up. They left. They went home. Some went downtown and enjoyed dinner. So we were very, very fortunate at how that all played out, and I think it's a testament to how well Nashua groups work together and how much relationship building, not just with the police department, but with everybody goes on. So that was a huge help. There were people that saw some National Guard at the station. We just had been prepared for a couple of those issues in case it spilled over and blew up. But fortunately, it didn't. Several business owners had, questioned what are you doing to keep us safe? And that's kind of the point of me telling you the story. That was our plan. We weren't being so public about it. We were trying to keep really low key and be prepared. So everything worked out that night. I think the businesses felt very little impact for it. Hopefully they saw some business from people who were hungry after. Started to rain a little bit, but I think the evening worked well. So the other major thing that has happened to us and hit us recently is COVID-19. Back in March when this struck us all, we knew it was, well, as it started to unfold and things started to close down, we knew there was going to be a huge impact on businesses. And we as a department had to take from a couple different perspectives. So I had to make sure that we had enough officers always prepared to respond to any calls or any be able to manage any situations in Nashua. Because of that, we took about 20 officers, sent them home, 20 to 25 officers, and sent them home and just said, stay home, stay healthy. We took any civilian that we could allow to work from home to do so. And we just kept minimizing the way we handle calls. We took a lot more calls over the phone. We had fire rescue do medical calls while we would stand back outside until needed. So we really shifted the way we were thinking. And finally, we did a lot of, Nashua PD is very proactive. We do a lot of motor vehicle enforcement. We do a lot of subject stops. We talk to people. We get out of our car. I'm a firm believer in that as a style of police work. So people see a high visibility of police officers present. So we started to be more reactive, meaning we would only answer calls only when we needed to and provide the safety and services, but still be able to maintain safety for the officers and for the public and not spread what was going on. That became a little bit challenging for us. I think we handled it well, and we were able to maintain a safe and healthy police department. But what happened is there was such a low visibility of police officers out there. I think the people started coming in from out of town, and people started to set up shops. We saw a lot of people we didn't recognize, we didn't know. Drug sales were increasing. We were getting information that was increasing. So over the span of a quick 4 or 5 weeks, people started moving in that we didn't really know. And that really forced us to get back into being very proactive. So probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, we started ramping up our policing efforts again. It just felt that it would be irresponsible not to stay on top of it, seeing how quickly we were starting to lose some of that knowledge of people we had. We wanted to change that and make sure we were there. The other thing I will talk about is the response from not only the police department, but from the entire city regarding the businesses and how to keep the businesses going and to keep everybody up and running. It was very important for me and my police department to support all the businesses that were struggling. We knew they were shut down, drive up services. We knew as we were talking that a lot of city entities were trying to work together to make sure that we could give you the most potential to continue to do business. And if that meant we kind of adapt our policing and back off certain things, we would do that to make sure that we could ensure that you folks all had the ability to stay connected and make any opportunity you could just to get through this period, and hopefully recovery for you folks would be a lot easier. So we did a lot of those things. We tried to work with Tim Cummings and really be helpful about allowing those road structures and what that would look like, and what anything we can do to accommodate it, we're going to do. Well, part of that whole thing, and you're all still dealing with it now, I'm sure, is the mask legislation. So a decision was made very quickly from the city that people wearing a mask and mandating a mask would be the best policy health-wise. So they enacted legislation. It had to come out quickly just because they were trying to get on top of it early. I understand and respect it. I think it was a good decision. Unfortunately, when you do some of that so quickly, you overlook some things in constructing the legislation that leaves questions unanswered and procedures unanswered. So we're still struggling through that right now. I think, I'm sure most of you know that there is a mask ordinance. I'm sure most of you feel, okay, if I read this ordinance, I can't have people take their mask off in a restaurant, or they can't go to a gym and work out without taking their mask off. So there's a lot to the ordinance now that the governor has opened other things up that is going to require changes. We've met with Bobby Bagley, Tim Cummings, the corporate counsel, and anyone else that is kind of connected to this legislation to try to tweak it and change it so we can be more clear for all of the businesses to be able to understand what it looks like, what that ordinance looks like, and what enforcement would look like. We tried really hard from day one to not make this a fine or a ticket type of a response. It was important for us to educate people and just go up, and that just involves talking to everybody. Hey, this is what you have to have a mask. It's a city ordinance. This is what it looks like. This is what you should be doing. And we really focused our approach that way. It's just the optics of police officers going up and telling everybody to put on masks and giving them fines. It's just not something I wanted right now, especially with everything that was going on in the last 4 weeks. So we're still struggling through a little bit about changing that ordinance now and get some more clarity so people can understand what that's going to look like. As you know, there's a huge division between masks and no masks. It's an emotional issue for a lot of people to deal with, but it's a reality that we have to. So we're going to continue to focus on the education component of it, but we will also settle into language in the legislation that will give us some enforcement powers if we have multiple repeat offenders. I'm sure most of you have customers in your stores or establishments that half of them will complain about people not wearing masks, half of them will complain about masks. So I think we're all struggling through how we do this. I've always asked for people's patience, and I've asked people to remember that this is something that none of us have seen in our lifetime. So many of us have had to kind of adapt on the fly and make a sudden left-hand turn. And I've been, I guess before I open it up to questions, I'll say two things. But number one, I think people of Nashua should appreciate the effort and the willingness to cooperate between everybody in Nashua, particularly all the city entities and the nonprofits. Everybody has been working really hard together. I've seen very little drama. I've seen very little non-cooperation. It's been pretty fun to watch, just to see how well people are responding and helping each other to kind of keep the city running. The mayor was great, keeping the employees working and paid. The attitude has been, let's figure out a way to make sure these businesses can manage any way they can. What can we do to manage? So as kind of a non-business owner looking from the outside in, I was very impressed, and I'm very happy to see what the city did, what everybody in the city did to kind of make sure that we can kind of support you, the business owners, and everybody throughout the city that's trying to get through this all together. The last thing I'll talk about before I take questions is it's going to be important for everybody to remember the mental health toll this is taking on all of us, not only the police officers, but the business owners, the kids, the families. Everybody is stressed out to the max. They're trying to figure out what they can and can't do. They're trying to bleed off energy. They're trying to return to some normalcy in their life and do something that can just make them feel normal again. And there's not too many opportunities to do it, even as it's opening up. People are struggling to get to the beaches and the mountains and stuff. So be mindful of the fact that this is taking a toll on everybody. That can manifest itself in some pretty destructive ways sometimes, whether it be, quickness to protests. We've had a huge increase in shots fired calls. So there's a lot of anger and frustration built up, and I'm sure you're seeing it in your customers and how they react to each other. So I'd ask there be some patience. I'd ask there be some tolerance and understanding for everybody. But please don't hesitate to call us for anything if you feel the need or you feel unsafe. So with that, I will open it up to any questions, Kate.
All right, so here we go. Let's take the spotlight off. So thank you for that. So how have your officers sort of been mitigating exposure? Like, what was the process? Because again, it happened very quickly. Like, how did you determine what the new protocols would look like, and what are they? Have they changed since it started? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we, like I said, the first thing we did was we took 20, I think it was 24 guys and sent them right home. And we told them, stay home, stay healthy, minimize contact with everybody else. Because we had seen in New York that there was huge exposure rates. And when that happened, people had to quarantine, and there were whole shifts of officers that had to quarantine. So I needed to be able to keep a group of guys home and ready to come back and deploy. We've increased our use of PPEs. Initially, we had very little, and the hospitals needed it more. So when we were able to finally get the PPEs, guys would wear masks and gloves whenever they could, given the resources that we had. We took a lot of calls over the phone. If you could answer the report through the phone, we would take a report that way. I don't like to do that. I think part of the beauty of Nashua PD is its personal touch. I think we connect with people when we can talk face to face. So responding to their houses and to help them with the calls, I think, is important. So that was difficult for us to do, but it was the most important thing. Mm-hmm. And again, we worked with fire department, and the fire department took a lot of the medical calls. We were ready to go in case they needed. And the final thing we did is we had people step outside when available. Hey, can you step outside, meet us outside, and keep a social distance? So those are the major things we did. We've gotten more proactive again. So we've started stopping cars again. We try to wear PPE gear when we can. We minimize our risk exposure, but we're getting back into that constant contact with people. We're preparing now for round 2. If that comes, what will it look like? Will we do a similar response to what we did the first time? We're going to monitor it by ear, but I would say to expect something very similar if a round 2 comes and there starts to be a large rate of infection.
Interesting. So we have a question. So presumably, at least when this started, I've noticed traffic picking up more recently, but traffic was down, right? People were staying home. And so did you see changes in motor vehicle accidents, in traffic patterns? Like, what did that look like when this first happened?
I had the best commute to work for 3 months out of any time ever. It was great. I owned the highway. We definitely a huge reduction in traffic. So we didn't see as many accidents happening, but what we started to see is a lot of speed complaints. We started to see a lot more distracted drivers. When there doesn't seem to be as many vehicles on the road, people were just not paying as much attention. So we were trying to see a pattern and see if there's anything that we could really put our finger on, but it didn't. For the most part, throughout this thing, I had about 25 different crimes that we would spotlight 3 times a week. Hey, what's the increase? Compared to last year, this date, what was it? COVID time, what was it? And then year to date, what was it? So we were looking for any patterns of call volume stopping. We saw a huge drop in domestic violence complaints. We saw a huge drop in DCYF letter complaints. So we were a little bit concerned that people weren't getting messages about It's okay to still call the police. We're here. We'll help you. We were concerned that some of these victims weren't being able to share their stories or get the help that they needed. So for the domestic violence situation, we worked real hard with Bridges. Bridges had great messaging that they put out. Hey, we're still here. Call us. Use this resource. That's where that relationship with the nonprofits came in. Where, okay, we got to put a lot of stuff out. Hey, we're still here. Call us. We're here to help. So we did a lot of that work based on what we were looking at for numbers. But overall, the crime rates were dropped significantly. And I think a part of that was that people were not, the only ones that really jumped up was gunshots. I think we're at like 26 or 27 shots fired incidents for the year, where this time last year we had 4. So that goes back to people, I think, needing or blowing off steam in an unhealthy way. But again, that puts us back to being proactive to try to stop these kids. We know that some of them are related. We've made arrests in over half of them. So it's just, those are the things that we saw increase.
Well, it's interesting, when this first hit, it was a really neat kind of sense of togetherness, right? Because everywhere in the world, and whether you're, a celebrity who lives in a multi-million-dollar house, or, someone who's making minimum wage, like it created this kind of level playing field and brought everybody together. But it almost seems like as time has gone on, different things have come up that have made it more polarizing. Have you noticed that in dealing with people, that even the masks thing, like you talked about before, right, that there's a lot of people who have very strong opinions about that?
Yeah, I've definitely got a sense of kind of people being more hypersensitive to things. So you had parents that were very hypersensitive now that they had their kids home and what their kids were doing at home and how their kids were acting. The teachers got a lot more respect over those first 4 weeks. So you saw a lot of tension. You're right. At the beginning, there was a nice camaraderie and a togetherness, but as it started to wear thin and people had no place to go and nothing to do and no outlets for that energy, they started really fixating on small, minor things. So we were getting a lot more complaints, neighbor complaints. Well, my neighbor's dog is doing this, and this little thing. So it seemed to be small quality of life things that usually people may not notice or pick up on. That was increasing for us, which, like the masks, you have to go and kind of navigate through those problems between two people. And for the most part, both sides are never going to be happy. So when they're upset by little items and they've got all that pent up anger, it just kind of blows over into bigger issues. And we've seen tons of that.
And so from your perspective, and sort of asking you to do a little bit of crystal ball, but like, if we're headed for some sort of round 2, or further going from safer at home back to stay at home or something, like, what are the best ways for people to prepare? What things could we all do to help all of you? Are there things that come to mind?
I think patience is the biggest one. I really think that you'd see, if you turn on any type of social media, you see the judging going on. The people are home more, so they had an ability to express their anger on the keyboard, and it was usually not based in fact. It's usually based only on emotion, and not having face-to-face dialogue got people more confident to say whatever they wanted to say without worrying about the repercussions. So the biggest thing, and this is not just as a police officer, but the biggest thing I would recommend is just take a step back and the rule for sending an email. Wait a little while before you send it. Don't put something out that, yep, I feel this way, I'm going to type this right now, because it just explodes for everybody, and that anger comes out. Then it polarizes two different sides, and everybody weighs in, and everybody hates each other. And it makes it difficult for anybody to resolve the situation, and it makes it difficult for there to be a coming down process, because you never get to have that dialogue that you can work through the problem. So my biggest recommendation for anybody is to stay off social media, or at least control what you do on social media. The support that we need is understand that if the city passes an ordinance that requires masks, we have to enforce it, or our job is to enforce that mask. We're being told by medical personnel that it is the best idea to do it. So it's inconvenient, it's difficult, but just know that the National Police Department is committed to working with you to figure out the best way to do it, to keep everybody's interest. We want to keep everybody safe and healthy, and we want the businesses to be able to continue to be successful and work hard.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So a question from one of our guests, how has the narrowing of Main Street for, in favor of restaurants and outdoor dining, how has that worked from your standpoint, from the department's standpoint?
So we've had very, very little problems. From a traffic control perspective, we've had very little issues. We've had little issues with people coming in and getting the takeout to go. So it's been pretty successful. We're really starting to look now. This is the first week that a lot more businesses are opening up, a lot more outside of the Main Street organizations are starting to go back to work. So I'm a little worried now about the increase in traffic up and down Main Street now. Um, so that's something we really, really have to keep our eye on. But we've had very little problems. The problems that we've had come in with loud motorcycles, loud stereos going up and down Main Street. The diners are right there, and if you're stuck in traffic, they've got to listen to it, and it's distracting for them trying to get out and get some peace. So we've tried to increase our enforcement there. We've had state police came down and helped us specifically one night with motorcycles and loud exhaust. They brought a decimeter down, and we checked. We stopped, I think, 16 motorcycles that night. We arrested 2 people. Issued several summonses, one of them for an illegal muffle or decibel level. So as those type of problems come up, we try to tackle them one at a time based on what the needs are. Speeding has been huge for us. We're getting a lot of complaints about speed. So we're trying to spend time at all the spots that we're getting the complaints and be able to deal with those complaints. We have stealth radar units, meaning we have machines that can take speeds of a bunch of cars so we can see patterns, and then we can put officers there to run radar and do enforcement.
Very interesting. And so I know there's been talk about trying, the current downtown will go through November, right? But I know there's been talk about a lot of people would like to see this be a long-term thing in the summers, or allow for, it reminds me a little bit of what Concord did, right, up in the downtown, that they it used to be 2 lanes in each direction, and they put it to 1 lane in each direction and widened sidewalks. And I think it was a pretty controversial thing while it was happening. A lot of businesses were really concerned, but it seems to have worked out well. Do you have thoughts about what that might look like long term, or if it might make sense? I know it's a complicated issue, but
Yeah, no, I love the fact that that all the business on Main Street seem to think it's a positive thing. I don't really, Tim Cummings would hear a lot more of the logistical complaints, but public safety wise, it's been great. It's getting people outside, spread out. If you've got a great net, I think it's a great atmosphere to bring people in, and to be downtown. And the police officers like it when it's busy. We don't like boring, quiet nights. So if there's a lot of people, a lot more stuff's happening, and the people have been great so far at the bars. If they choose to continue it next year, I'm sure they'll do a couple of tweaks, but I think it's a great idea. Again, the only concern I would worry about is, what does the traffic look like?
mm-hmm.
What does it look like now? What is it going to look like in September if the kids go back to school and the buses have to go up and down Main Street? That could be problematic and ugly, but again, everybody's willing to kind of find solutions. So I think it's great and just fun. It's just a nice atmosphere.
All right, so another question. So sometimes people say they won't come downtown if they have to park in a parking garage. Can you talk about that feeling? So the question asker said, we assume crime in the garage is not a concern, but is that something that you hear?
Of course, anytime you have people parking in a parking garage, there's always some sketchiness to it. People are nervous, but we do patrol through there quite a bit. Parking enforcement also patrols through. So we have very little crimes registered in the parking garages, more subject stops where we stop and talk to people. So they're definitely well lit. They're clean and they're well maintained, and they're very close to anywhere you'd want to go. High Street's right there, right on Main Street. So I think that I would encourage people to use them. It's easier. It's right where your car is. It's 1 block back. It's safe. We have bike patrols. We have sometimes foot patrols based on manpower. And if you've ever driven downtown, you definitely see your share of marked police cars roaming around. Yeah. So it's definitely safe. I would encourage people to use them.
Okay.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, so if you have questions, again, the Q&A button, if you hover down towards the bottom of your screen, feel free. It's a good opportunity. So another one from one of our participants. So, we'd love to hear some good news. What is the best example of sort of community involvement you've seen or heard from your staff during this time, from your team?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. It's hard because a lot of my staff was gone. They were home. And believe it or not, a lot of them were itching to get back to work. I guess one of the biggest excitements for me is the continued work on different like nonprofits and PAL. They've got their Building on Hope project, and people still continue to volunteer. Businesses are still donating products and time and energy, and people are still volunteer to come. So that has been pretty amazing in the response to keeping kids fed. Nashua has always had a very vibrant or big need for feeding families that can't afford to do so. And they were worried when the school shut down that they weren't going to be able to manage it. But the number of volunteers that have stepped up in this community to take on those roles and make sure it still gets done is just simply amazing. So, we can continue to go out and do our job, and I can't think of anything like super positive. People don't usually call us and say, "Hey, having a good day? Can come over. I just want to tell you I'm having a good day."
Yeah. Well, and I would agree with you. The way that the community has come together, right, and people have volunteered, the United Way has done amazing stuff. I've even loved the relationship that the Chamber has formed with the Economic Development Department and Great American Downtown. Like, there's been a lot of cohesiveness, and I think it all just happened organically, but also really quickly, and it's been really nice to see that happen.
Yeah, I'll agree. I agree with you 100%. How organically it seemed to happen. I think people just took a step and said, "Okay, we need to get this done." And another positive for all of us is the way we do processes. That the whole mantra of "it's always been done this way." Well, we've been forced to do it a different way, and I think we're realizing, hey, this works pretty good. We can keep doing this, which I
Yeah.
think is phenomenal for anybody.
Well, and I think that's happened for a lot of people, right? I think they've been able to find efficiencies or try things. I mean, even just working remotely, I think there were a lot of companies who were maybe call it more of an old school mindset that thought, for years, right? If you're not in the office, the work's not getting done. And I think this time has not only opened their eyes about that, but again, about, are there ways even for us, right? We now approve things virtually instead of printing and signing and right, like just little things. And so I'm curious, I always like to find out, I love to hear about what you're doing for work, but as a person, what did you want to be when you were a kid? Did you always want to be a police officer, or did you want to be something else when you were young?
Well, I grew up in Nashua. I grew up right off of Exit 4 on Harris Road. And I knew early on there was a couple of incidents in my life where I saw police, and they always impressed me as being professional, well dressed. They just always impressed me. And I knew in high school, going into high school, that that's what I wanted to be. And I think if you're from Nashua and you graduated with me, you'd know that I kind of made decisions in my life to make sure I set myself up to be considered as a police officer or considered to get hired, So I got very lucky. I love Nashua. I love working for Nashua PD, and it's really the only place I've ever wanted to work. So yeah, it's been, ever since I was young, and now that I'm getting older and, towards the end of my career, I have to figure out what I want to do when I grow up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. We're lucky to have you. What is your favorite part of your job? Do you have a favorite?
Um, Yeah, I think that the best part of my job now is the last 5 years I've had an opportunity to get away from the constant negativity. And by that I mean, like I said earlier, most police get sent to a call. It's to help somebody in crisis. It could be a major crisis, it could be a small crisis. To each of those people, it's a big deal. It's a big crisis. And that's what we get to go to. Time in, time out. You don't get to see people on a positive side. You don't get to see the good things that are necessarily happening. So the last 5 years as a deputy chief and as a chief, I've been able to get out and sit on boards for nonprofits and to do volunteer activities. And, we do the Arlington Street Community Center. We give trees away. We give 100 trees away at Christmas time of year. That's one of my favorite times. It's just, it gives me an opportunity to see people at whatever level they are, whether they're down and out or they're struggling financially or they're wealthy, just to see the good in people. I get to see people who have give. I get to see the people who need get, and the smile on the face and that willingness for them to work together. So for me, it's been very rejuvenating as a person to see that and to know that a lot of people say, "Hey, I see your officer's at PAL. He's really good. His officer so-and-so here, he helped me out or she helped me out." And so those things rejuvenate me. And unfortunately, knowing this coming up through the ranks, the officers don't always get a chance to see that or to feel that there is positive feelings toward them, especially right now. They need it a lot right now.
Right, for sure. So I'm curious, so I've said from the beginning that even those of us that have the same job as before this started, our job is different, right? I mean, no doubt, right? With the things that you've talked about, your job has changed. Are there any things that you've learned about yourself through this? Like things that you sort of recognize about yourself that maybe wouldn't have happened if not for this pandemic?
Yeah, well, I'll go a little bit further back. So I got promoted to chief last August 1st, and to say it's been a unique set of challenges is an understatement. We've had a lot of weird things that my partners, my deputies joke with me. They're keeping a list of all the kind of messed up things that I've had to kind of deal with and we've dealt with. So yeah, there's been some huge learning curves. Being able to separate and trust your two deputies and your captains to do their jobs, and really have minimal involvement in the decision making. You know, they'll come to me with a final decision and say, "This is everything we want to do, and here's why. Can we do it?" Yep. Whereas before, you felt more connected to the process. Well, okay, let's talk this out. Why do we do it? How do we do it? What are some good ways? So it's been a little bit of a struggle and a disconnect for me to not feel included. I feel sometimes useless, and I know that's kind of not what I mean, but you just kind of I've got great people that work with me, so that's been a struggle. We had when John killed himself, and we had the rally. We had to set up command centers, incident command centers, and for me to what they call stay in my lane, while the people that were supposed to be doing what they were doing, and I was just supposed to stay in my office until I was needed. That was a struggle too, because I like to walk around and just be a part of what's going on.
Yep.
So yeah, those are tough.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time for sure. So someone asked about the Nashua PAL building renovation that's happening, whether or not you want to sort of talk about what that looks like, let people know, and if there are ways for people or businesses to still get involved.
Yeah, Nashua PAL they were selected as from a group called Building on Hope. Building on Hope is a group of people that every 2 years they select a nonprofit and they give them an extreme home makeover. If you remember the show, historically, Building on Hope will come in over a 7 or 8 day period and completely renovate the building, and it's done all through partnerships with all different businesses in the community. With COVID, we couldn't do it over the course of 8 days. We were very limited. COVID shut everybody down for a bit. We were supposed to be done in March. COVID shut it down, and now we're restricted as to when building people can come in and contractors can come in and go out and stuff. So they've been amazing at how they've adapted. They've really worked hard to coordinate people coming in. The people who are committed to it are still staying with it and they're still helping. As of right now, Sean, when we started this thing, Sean Nelson, who's the director of PAL, said, I'd be happy if we just get a new coat of paint for these kids. Well, we got a whole new elevator. We got an elevator donated and put in, so it's now ADA compliant for anybody to get access to that building. Beautiful new porch out front. The building is gutted right now. Volunteers are ready to come in, and some of the rooms that are being designed are going to be amazing. And the amount of people that PAL services every year, those kids are going to get a great opportunity for just a safe, happy place to go and become well educated. So that's and businesses can contribute. If you're in the trades, if you're in any type of construction, lighting, fixtures, be a part. We're looking for certain small things to put in there, or computers, or whatever your specialty is. We'll be looking for volunteers to come help paint, help build walls, if that's what your skills are. So there's tons of work there. And I just want to say real quick, that's only one of the nonprofits in this city. There's so many people that are doing so many things, and they've all struggled with trying to raise money. Typically, they compete for the same dollars as everybody else. But right now, nobody's comfortable asking for money because people are out of work and businesses are shut down. And so it's been a real big struggle for every nonprofit. And to say how impressed I am at how well they're still working together and how they're managing and trying to come up with creative ideas is just amazing. And know that they still need support. So PAL's certainly a worthwhile cause. Marguerite's Place, certainly a worthwhile cause. Any nonprofit that kind of sparks your passion, any issue you're passionate about, they need your help. So please try to get out there for them.
Absolutely. I think for those of us I'm a New Hampshire native as well, you sort of not take for granted, but you're used to there being so many valuable, vibrant nonprofits. But in so many other states do the work that nonprofits do in New Hampshire. And so I think, to your point, right, we're just so grateful for all of the different organizations that are providing such critical services across the spectrum. And I feel like it's a good lead in to mention to everyone that not only is our chief a finalist for Volunteer of the Year on Thursday for the Eminence Awards, but also Nashua PAL is a finalist for Nonprofit of the Year. And so you were nominated by Marguerite's Place for the volunteer work that you do there. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Krista. I know you're on right now, and yeah, that's a very much appreciated nomination, but it's a struggle for me because I see so many people do so many good things in this community. Marguerite's Place, transitional housing for women, and it also provides daycare. They've got licensed teachers, a licensed daycare center in there, and they help women just kind of get back on their feet, get an education or get a job in both, and kind of transition from kind of a controlled environment of housing up through to their own condos, up on their own. And it's an amazing process to watch happen, and so many dedicated people doing it. And that's just, one of a couple that has a similar mission. So they're an amazing group of people there.
Well, and so everyone should tune in on Thursday evening from 5 to 6 as we're going to announce the winners. So certainly if anyone has any last questions, but otherwise I wanted just to ask you, is there anything that we don't know about the police department that we should?
Oh, okay. So we're going to be on this call now until about 3:30 p.m. Tomorrow. Yeah, listen, I guess what I will touch upon quickly is because of everything that's going on in the country, there is a lot of conversation happening about police officers and police use of force tactics and de-escalation tactics and policies and use of force um, and accreditation. So the one thing I will leave you with all today is the Nashua Police Department has been nationally accredited since 1993. What that means is we have followed best practice policing procedures since that time. We get audited every year on at least 100 of our standards, and every 4 years they come in and audit all of our standards and do an insight visit, making us prove that we do follow the policies that we have. We've always had a use of force policy. We've always had a bias-based policing policy. Um, you hear a lot about de-escalation. De-escalation just isn't me talking somebody down from a situation. It includes teaching my officers about cultural competency, cultural awareness. It includes teaching them about mental health awareness, about what that looks like on the street. How can we better respond to people on the street? We have an autistic awareness program where if you register an autistic person and you tell us what their triggers are, we know that information responding to the calls. That gives us a better approach to handling it. So if we know, for example, light triggers something in that autistic child or person, cops have these big flashlights that we shine. We can land an airplane with. We won't use that flashlight on the call. We'll go and we'll make sure being aware of it and what it can do. We don't do it, so it gives the outcome a better chance. We have use of force policies. We have, if you look on our website, you'll see there were 7 or 8 questions that were going around nationally about, does your police department have this? Does your police department have that? If you go on Nashua PD website, nashuapd.com, you'll see I've answered kind of all of those questions and referred you to the policies that we have that dictate what we do. And I think that's important because I want people of Nashua to know that a lot of what you're hearing about the country, through the country, we do and we've done it for so long that it's ingrained in the culture of the PD. And that's very important for us. We have a very strict policy on who we hire and how we hire them, and the testing that goes into it and the backgrounding that goes into it. And we have a very clearly defined discipline system where if you continue to have problems, you won't be working here. So I think that's important for you as Nashvans to understand. When you start to hear all this stuff nationally, know that we're different or we follow the best practices.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. And thank you again for all that you do. We're certainly very grateful. Someone did send a comment. We'd like to thank the chief and the department for making Nashua a great place to live, work, and play. We consider the department an asset and not the problem. We support you and thank you for working to be a resource. So certainly we'll second that.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And listen, I appreciate the comment about us not being the problem. It's a worthy conversation to have, and it's something that police departments, including ours, should continue to look for and look at those relationships with everybody, the minority communities, the Black community, you name it. It's important for us to have the conversations and know how we make each other feel so we can do it better.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate the insight and your time, and we look forward to seeing you on Thursday evening. So for the rest of you, keep an eye out on our website for the other chamber exclusive conversations coming up, but hopefully we'll see all of you on Thursday for the Eminence Awards this year. A little different than originally anticipated, but certainly still very celebratory.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good afternoon. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.